Hey, this Ramon channel is off before, and the camera's a little off. I'm experimenting, so don't let that get to you. But today we're going to be doing a different type of study. Today we're going to be doing philosophy, and we're going to be doing stoicism, specifically Epictetus. Now, before you all get all, hey, isn't there another channel that's also doing stoicism? Yes, you're right, there is. But there's actually multiple channels that are doing stoicism. This just happens to be only one that's popular right now. There's this great channel that actually has a lot of stuff on Kierkegaard that talks about this kind of stuff too. So I want to go over the first 5 sections of the Discourses. So what I'm going to do is first give you my notes, and then I'll give you a little interpretation, a little commentary on it. The book opens up with the author distancing Epictetus from the work that bears his name. And this is done with a letter that is addressed from Aaron to Lucius. Now, the interesting thing about that opening letter is that there's not really much to it. It sets the groundwork for the basics that you need to know. Epictetus is a slave. He was very smart. This is a friend of his. His friend is now recording the words after the fact of what Epictetus either said to him or what he thinks Epictetus meant or was explaining to him in these conversations, in these discourses. Then we get to section 1. In section 1, the opening is the opening discourse. And it is very stoic, including references to the benefits of cold showers and dry air. And anyone who's read Seneca would understand why this is a very stoic statement, or why these are very stoic statements. And it even advises its reader to concentrate on one thing at a time, and that we should devote ourselves to that one thing that we are studying. So whatever we're going to do, we need to do it wholeheartedly, all the way in. And then we need to do one thing at a time. Anyone who's ever read Marcus Aurelius or Seneca will hear these terms and be like, okay, yeah, I know this. I know this already. Okay? It starts off very familiar, and then it quickly gets into ideas that the other two major Stoics don't dive into as deeply, to be honest about it. The opening segment almost reads like the Christian serenity prayer, requesting the reader to look to Zeus instead of Christ for the ability to accept the things that they can't change as God wills. And here, the God is the Father, which is also another similarity with Christianity, with the references to the Father. But again, the God, okay? And it's done in the singular, even though Epictetus does acknowledge other gods, much like we would acknowledge angels as gods with lowercase g. He acknowledges one prime God, which is an interesting development at this time period. He says to accept things as God wills, to know what is in your power to control and what is not. For the author's version of Epictetus, your body is not your own, for you will one day lose it, and it can do things on its own that you either do or do not want it to do, before you can consciously think to do it, or it can even do things against your will, involuntary motions. And that's very dramatic for him. He presents it as almost as a polemic against atheism, really, and against agnosticism. So it's interesting that that's where he's starting off from, considering Stoicism isn't really known for its deeply religious overtones, though a lot of Christians do ascribe to Stoicism. And then he asks a question. And he says, for those who think such things do not matter, do you think these things are of small account? Do you think it's of small account that there could be a God? Do you think that it's a small account that that your body can do things against your will, that can do things without you consciously thinking of doing those things? Do you think that's a small thing? And I'll ask you, do you think that's a small thing, or do you think that's huge? That while you have free will and you can make choices, your body does things on its own without you having to choose. Or I should say that your body is capable of doing things on its own without you having to choose. Then we get to section 2. And in section 2, he then advises Epictetus, or the author using Epictetus' voice, advises us, the readers, to act according to our nature. That we should know our worth and set our value, that is self-worth and income, accordingly. That we should remember, not every horse runs fast. Not every dog is good at catching a scent. Not every cat is a good hunter. Not every man is the wealthiest, wisest, strongest, or best looking. But that shouldn't stop us from trying to be the swiftest, the strongest, the wisest, the most intelligent, and the most knowledgeable that we ourselves can be. And that's a very powerful statement, and one that, a lot of affirmation seeking type people would have already heard, you know what I mean? But it's still a very positive thing, which is be the best you can be. And it also gets into a little bit of Plato and Aristotle and Aristotelian thinking with the purpose and the form and all that kind of stuff. He kind of covers everything. And then we get to section number 3. And this is where he talks about how man has 2 inclinations, one animal and one divine. And anyone who's watched any of my Bible study knows that I also ascribe to that way of thinking, although I think of us as having 3 natures. He divides it into 2. He does a nice dichotomy of the soul here, or dichotomy of the spirit and of the will. A nice dichotomy of the will, I should say. For him, to give into your animal nature is to become wretched, while to rise to your higher nature can be difficult to do consistently. So he doesn't deny the animal nature. He doesn't say that the animal nature can be done away with. He says that we're always going to have that part of us as long as we're mortal, as long as we're living in a human body. But that to rise above it is what we want to do, and we want to rise above it as often as we can, even though we can't do it all the time. Or if we can, it's very difficult to do it all the time. We get mired by our instincts or by our passions. Then we get to section 4. And he says, never look for your work in one place, and then look for your progress in another. And I think that's very powerful advice. It kind of goes to weightlifting. If you're doing squats, you're not going to get a big chest. If you're doing a lot of chest work, you're not going to get big legs. If you're doing a lot of ab work, you're not going to lose weight somewhere else. So whatever you work on, that's where you're going to have progress. Basically, if you run a lot, that's not going to help you in math. And if you do a lot of math work, that's not going to help you in running. Like, whatever you want to get better at, that's the thing you have to work at. He says that your work should match your aim, your goal. He then highlights the benefits and limits of practical knowledge versus theoretical knowledge. He implies that books cannot teach you experience. Then he states what he thinks should be all men's goals. And by men here, I'm assuming he means humans. He starts by defining serenity as detachment from desire and passion. He then states that virtue, happiness, freedom, and serenity should be your goals. So it's not one singular goal for him. Part of the goal is serenity, and for him, serenity is detaching yourself from both desire and passion. But for him, serenity is not the only goal. He has multiple goals here. He has virtue, happiness, and freedom as other goals in line with serenity, saying that you need all of these things to have true serenity, and that you can measure your progress to these goals by seeing how free your will and your choices are. And remember how he said earlier that you're kind of a slave to your passions. Well, the less enslaved you are, the more free you are. Do you see? The less you're enslaved to something else, the more free you are. The less free you are, the less choices you have. So the more choices you have, and the more you can make choice, the more choices you can make, the more free you are. If you are making your decisions based on avoiding your fears, or on reaching your desires, or attaining your passions and pleasures, then you are not truly free. You're just not. And thus you are not truly happy. So if fear is driving you, or desire, or passion, or pleasure, then you're not truly free. You're not truly happy. These things are momentary and they don't last, or they burn you out. True happiness would be happiness that lasts, that is sustainable. Then we get to section 5 of the first discourse. And in this discourse, the author then states that arguments fail. All arguments eventually fail. Especially when you corner someone and their heart hardens and their heart turns to stone. And this is also language that is evocative of biblical language, which, again, I don't think that Epictetus was a pre-Christian or knew about Judaism in that way. But here he is talking in these terms that we would nowadays understand as biblical. He says that if you take the approach of cornering someone in an argument and not giving them an escape, and again, this is very Art of War, this is very Sun Tzu in his approach. He says that if you take this approach to proving your point, even if your opponent does realize what you say, he will pretend not to. If you continue on winning the battle but losing the war, you will only brutalize your opponent, and he will feel shame. He or she will feel shame. Losing him or her, losing them from your cause, losing him from your cause, and making him your enemy. If you corner someone and you don't give them an escape and you just brutalize them with your answers, with your attack against their ideas, all you're doing is making an enemy. You're not convincing them of anything. And that's how he begins. So those are the first 5 sections of the first discourse. I found it very beautiful. I'll be doing this 5 sections at a time if I can. It's my plan. Although some of the later sections get a lot longer and a lot more in depth. He starts off very easy, very light, but he starts asking questions and he starts getting you to think real quick. But anyway, this was my first installment of my study of Epictetus. I hope you enjoyed it. Please comment down below if you have questions. Please tell me if you think I got anything wrong. I'd love to have a conversation with you and turn this into a dialogue. Please like, please subscribe, please share, and I'll talk to you all later. Peace.